CCUS Action Plan and outcomes from the Global CCUS Summit. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the webinar features. For audio, you have two options. You may either listen through your computer or over your telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the Mic and Speakers option in the audio pane. If you choose to dial in by phone, please select the telephone option, and a box on the right side will display the telephone number and audio pin you should use to dial in. If anyone is having technical difficulties with the webinar, you may contact the GoToWebinar's help desk at 888-259-3826 for assistance. If you would like to ask a question, we ask that you use the questions pane where you may type it in at any time during the webinar. Also, the recording of today's presentation will be added to YouTube at the link provided on this slide. Today's webinar agenda is centered around presentations that will review recent developments by the United Kingdom to support the development of CCUS, including discussion of the recently released CCUS Action Plan and convening of the International CCUS Summit in Edinburgh. Before we launch into the presentations, I will provide a quick introduction of today's panelists. Then, following the panelist presentations, we will have a Q&A session where the panelists will address questions submitted by the audience. Before introducing the panelists for today's webinar, I'd like to briefly take a moment to highlight a new feature available to those interested in CCUS developments and resources. In support of the Clean Energy Ministerial, or CEM, CCUS initiative, the Clean Energy Solutions Center hosts a portal page with links to information about the initiative, past and upcoming webinars, and now a new development called the CCUS Resource Library. This library provides relevant reports, data, and tools to aid those interested in learning more about all things CCUS. The resource library can be found at the link provided here. Please note that these slides will also be provided on the Clean Energy Solutions Center site following the conclusion of this webinar. Now I would like to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Will Lockhead, who is head of the CCUS policy team within the Department of Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy, or BEIS. Will's team leads on CCUS internationally through initiatives such as Mission Innovation and the Clean Energy Ministerial. We will also be hearing from Brian Allison today, who is the Assistant Head of CCUS R&D, Innovation, and International Engagement. Brian represents the UK at the Technical and Policy as Vice Chair groups of the Carbon Sequestration Leadership Forum, or CSLF, the IEA Greenhouse Gas R&D Program, or IEA GHG, and co-lead of the newly formed CCUS CEM initiative. And with those brief introductions, I'd like to welcome Will to the webinar.
Many thanks, and thanks for listening today. So as just mentioned, our presentation today will focus on the UK government's approach to CCUS, and also pick up on the Global CCUS Summit that the UK government co-hosted with the International Energy Agency last year. To start with, the contents of the presentation will focus on an introduction to the department, the CCUS Action Plan, followed by Q&A from yourselves. So if we go to the introduction slide, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy brings together responsibilities for business, industrial strategy, science, innovation, energy and climate change. And it is within that context that CCUS is developed. So the department as a whole is responsible for developing and delivering a comprehensive industrial strategy and leading the UK government's relationship with business, ensuring that the country has secure energy supplies that are reliable, affordable and clean, ensuring the UK remains at the leading edge of science, research and innovation, and leads tackling climate change. CCUS, within the UK government context, is set out in the government's Clean Growth Strategy, which was published in October 2017, which stated that we see a new opportunity for the UK to become a global technology leader in CCUS. We have the ambition that the UK should have the option of deploying CCUS at scale during the 2030s, subject to costs coming down sufficiently, and we will work on meeting that ambition through three themes. Firstly, to progress our commitment to deploying CCUS in the UK. Secondly, to collaborate with international partners to drive down the cost and accelerate the deployment of CCUS. And thirdly, to invest in CCUS innovation to support cost reduction and deployment in the UK. Next. So the UK government's view on CCUS is that we see it as potentially central to delivering least cost energy system decarbonisation to 2050, that it has an economy-wide role in supporting industrial decarbonisation, decarbonisation of the electricity supply, low carbon hydrogen production, and greenhouse gas removal technology, in particular bioenergy with CCS and direct air capture. That it has an important industrial strategy role in terms of potentially enhancing industrial competitiveness and protecting and creating high-value jobs across the UK and our industrial regions. That it can support a transition to a low-carbon economy, providing new markets for UK business and industry, including through the use of CO2. And that there is an opportunity for the UK to become a global leader, building on its already established leadership around research and development in the area. Next. We see CCUS not only as important to the UK, but also to meeting global climate ambitions set out in the Paris Agreement ambitions. I think we're very much aligned with the International Energy Agency and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change view on CCUS being important to keeping temperatures below 2 degrees Celsius. And this is just an example of, I think, the global action which is starting around CCUS, and action we are keen to build on through the Clean Energy Ministerial, through mission innovation, and working with individual companies and countries. Next. So the government's industrial strategy is a long-term plan to boost the productivity and earning power of people throughout the UK. In our view, and the government's view, CCUS is important to the industrial strategy and the so the industrial strategy, the UK government's industrial strategy sets out 5 foundations set out here on this slide, and I think CCUS, in our view, can support each of those foundations. So if we look at ideas, CCUS is important for the UK. There's an opportunity for the UK, to be an innovation leader across the CCUS value chain, from early stage R&D to storage appraisal to new capture technologies. Can support people. So we think there's a strong opportunity to build on, to build a domestic supply chain for CCUS in the UK, building on the UK's expertise on offshore oil and gas and also the chemicals industry. That through creating a new carbon dioxide infrastructure network, we can support the decarbonisation of the UK economy. That is vital that we deliver sustainable and investable commercial models for CCUS in the UK. And also, very importantly, CCUS can help support industrial regions, so specific places across the UK, maintain their industrial competitiveness, but also attract new industries and new jobs to their areas. Next. And this is just an example of across the country, so across all regions of the UK, there's expertise and examples of companies, academia, supporting the 5 foundations of the industrial strategy. And I won't go through each of those, but it gives you an idea of the sense of activity going on in the UK on CCUS. Next. And also, the UK is well placed to become a leader in CCUS. that building on our offshore expertise, our potential storage capacity, there are a number of projects being developed across the country, which we are keen to work with and which we are working with, and I think have potential to help support the development of CCUS both in the UK, but also having wider applicability to all regions of the world. Next.
Good afternoon, evening and morning. This is Brian Allison. We're going to swap in and out of this presentation to give you a little bit of interest in different people speaking. So I'm going to cover a little bit on the CO2 storage portfolio that the UK developed and looked at over the last number of years. As you can see from the slide, there is a number of sites that we have already extensively looked at. The Hewitt, Endurance and Goldeneye sites were heavily appraised during the time of a number of large projects that were being investigated, and those fields in the North Sea are very well characterized. A few years ago, in 2016, we decided to see what other storage potential the UK had, and we decided to have a major project that was looking at a portfolio of sites, and I think that's important. We didn't look for the best sites. We decided to explore mid-North Sea, southern North Sea, the Irish Sea, in terms of where we could store CO2. The UK is abundant in storage opportunities, and we looked at Hamilton in the Irish North Sea, Captain X, Forties 5, the Bunter Closure 36, and Viking Fields. And those were indicated on the map that you have. Next. So we wanted to prove that there is a secure storage resource beyond what had already been appraised. We took 18 months to do this. We worked with a number of UK organisations, and we believe that we produced an impressive storage portfolio. We wanted to alleviate most of the storage and schedule risk in projects, and just to help simplify commercial discussions going forward. We wanted to mature a portfolio of these four stores. As I said, it was based on broad geography, balancing risk. We wanted to have depleted gas. We wanted to have oil. We wanted different fields across different seas, and I think we achieved that. The government put in 2.5 million for this particular project. Next. Next. So I just want to talk through the FEED studies for those three large projects that we had. Generated a potential of 200 megatons of storage. And next, you will see that the storage was increased by the study that we undertook up to 1.6 gigatons. You can also see that with the top 20 sites, because what we actually did is that we looked at something like 600 sites to start with, and we whittled them down as far as the 20, and then we went down to the 5. So those top 20 sites generate potentially 7.1 gigatons of storage capacity. All the qualified sites that we managed to work through generated 8.6 gigatons. And the UK is open for storage business. And we can see we've got 78 gigatons of UK continental shelf potential, all ready one day for the storage of CO2. Next. As Will had already said, with regards to the various important sites that we have around the UK in terms of companies and institutions that deal with CCUS and CCS, we have some very leading research institutions, and many will be known to you. Cambridge University, the University of Edinburgh, Imperial College in London, University of Sheffield, University of Strathclyde, and apologise for any universities that I haven't actually mentioned who are dealing with CCUS. Been speaking to Leeds recently, and Cardiff and Swansea. So there's a lot of potential out there with regard to organisations, universities that are undertaking research on CCS, CCUS, both from storage, transportation, utilisation, and most importantly, capture. But above that, we also have the UK CCSRC, the United Kingdom CCS Research Centre, which is a national focal point for CCS research and development. Worth having a look on their website for what they can offer UK and interested parties. And that is generally based in the UK, in England and Wales and so on. However, we also have the Scottish CCS, which is a national focal point for CCS research and development in Scotland. Next.
Great, thanks, Brian. So it's Will again. I'm now going to talk through the CCUS deployment pathway and action plan that the UK government published in November last year. So some of you may be aware that the UK government set out a new approach to CCUS in its Clean Growth Strategy, which is a government-wide document setting out UK government's approach to how it will meet its climate change targets out to 2050. Last year, the government also set up a CCUS cost challenge task force, which reported to government in July last year. And it's, again, these documents are all online on the UK government website, and we can always provide the links to those afterwards if needed. So the key messages from our action plan, which we published last November, is that our vision is to become a global leader in CCUS. We want to unlock the potential of CCUS and also use that to secure the added value we think CCUS can bring to and businesses across the country. Our ambition remains that the UK should have the option to deploy CCUS at scale during the 2030s. And thirdly, our action plan is designed to enable the first deployment of CCUS at scale during the mid-2020s. Next. So a key commitment was the action plan is designed to enable the operation of the first CCUS facility in the UK from the mid-2020s. And how we will do that, we will undertake detailed engagement with industry and projects which are being developed. We will review the delivery and investment frameworks for CCUS. We will look at how the sort of delivery capability of CCUS in the UK. And later this year, we will set out the process for meeting that mid-2020s commitment. And the slide here just shows our indicative timeline from year one, which is 2019, out to year 9, recognizing that ultimately the sort of development and construction of a facility will depend on the size, complexity, location, etc. of any project which does proceed. Next. To meet that, we set out a number of delivery themes in the action plan, and I will go through, and Brian will as well, these delivery themes in order. So next. Starting with delivery theme 1, addressing policy barriers. Critical to this is a review we are undertaking on the delivery and investment frameworks for CCUS. So we want to ensure that the business environment works for all those involved in CCUS, that we identify the right commercial framework which enables investment, innovation, and cost reduction. So that in particular, we are looking at 3 specific areas. So CCUS in power, what is the role of CCUS in power sector decarbonisation, and also how best to incentivise that. So is it through a contract for difference support scheme, for example, or other types of support schemes from government? What is the role of industry in that as well? Secondly, how do you support CCUS in industry, so in chemicals, in steel, in gas processing, and so on, in cement, recognizing that CCUS industry is trades in global commodities, that industries are very sensitive to price, but also need to decarbonize their process emissions, and CCUS is likely to be critical in that. So how do we design an incentive mechanism that works for government, but also importantly works for industry? And thirdly, looking at CO2 infrastructure, how can this so the pipelines and storage facilities, how can this be best financed and deployed? And what are the right business models for that? How can it deal with issues such as long-term storage liabilities? Where does that risk lie? How does it work? What's decommissioning sort of requirements and responsibilities? So we have committed to doing this review this year. We are commissioning various bits of work, some of which have already completed. So for example, Element Energy completed work for us last November, looking at CCUS in industry and the sort of business models you might look at. And we have got other work ongoing looking at CCUS in power and CO2 infrastructure. That work will all be made publicly available over the coming months. And by the summer of this year, we expect to go out to consultation, so produce a consultation document setting out the range of models which the UK government has considered and its preferred model for each of those 3 areas. And then following that consultation, by the end of this year, look to set out government's view across each of those and then move into implementing them. Next. So as part of this work, we're also looking at additional evidence-based, how we can also improve our evidence base around different ways of supporting CCUS. So for example, do we need to use CO2 pipelines always, or can we use shipping as a way of reducing costs and so on? So again, we commissioned Element Energy to look at the opportunities and barriers to deploying CO2 shipping in the UK. That report was published in November by the UK government, and it set out what are some of the opportunities. So, for example, with projects with shorter lifetimes or smaller capture from projects, that may be more suitable to shipping rather than using pipelines. Again, distance also has a role to play, and it also identified potential barriers. So, for example, around the London Protocol, where you're unable to ship CO2 to another country for permanent storage, and that's something we are looking to look at how we work around those potential regulatory constraints. Next, we're also looking at the UK has a well-established, mature oil and gas industry offshore. So are there any existing oil and gas infrastructure as they come to the end of their life in terms of transporting oil, gas, etc., that could be reused for the purposes of transporting CO2 to reduce costs to CCUS projects? So we are looking at what is the potential for reusing existing assets for the purpose of supporting CCUS. So we are working with the UK's Oil and Gas Authority, with industry, with organisations within the department here who lead on decommissioning, to look to identify are there potential or existing oil and gas infrastructure which could be reused, identifying which which infrastructure that is, and then secondly, how you develop policy around reuse, taking account of liabilities, ownership issues, and we will look to publish a consultation on that also over the summer. Next. And then finally, we're also looking at the role that greenhouse gas removal technologies could play in meeting future emission targets. Two of the most scalable options for that are bioenergy with CCUS and direct air capture, both of which require carbon dioxide infrastructure. So we were working with the research community to further our understanding of these technologies, and we were also commissioned an organisation called Vivid Economics to assess the policy options for deploying greenhouse gas removal technologies. That work will complete over the spring, and again, that report will be made publicly available by the UK government. Next. The second delivery theme we're looking at is delivery capability. So, for example, if the UK is to deploy CCUS at scale in the 2030s, do we have the right understanding of the skills, capability required to enable that to happen? So we committed to undertaking a study of that, both looking at within government, but also across the UK as a whole. And I think we're very keen to learn from others on this. So, for example, GasNova, Japan CCS, and others, to understand their approach, what they're doing, and is that something the UK government could learn from. So we'd be very happy to engage further with you all on this, to learn from you as well. Next. The third delivery theme is around infrastructure. So as we look to develop the commercial and policy foundations, we also need to work with specific regions to understand the potential for deploying CCUS in those areas. And the map on the right of the slide just gives an indication of where we think CCUS is best deployed across the UK. And that's, I think the benefit of the UK is that a lot of its major industrial regions are located on the coast near large CO2 storage sites. And where they're not, we can use shipping to help that as well. So I think that's important for us going forward. And so we're keen to work with individual projects and industrial regions to understand that, but also we're working with industry as a whole to understand from them what are the critical challenges to delivering CCUS in the UK. So what are the cost structures, the risk sharing arrangements, and how can we ensure we get market-based frameworks that they can invest in? Next. An important part of that is the UK government's Energy Minister, Claire Perry, at the Conference of the Parties in December, announced an industrial clusters mission. So the UK has now set an ambition to establish the world's first net zero carbon industrial cluster by 2040, and at least one low carbon cluster by 2030. To achieve this, we think we need to have low carbon infrastructure in place in 2020 to support industrial decarbonisation. This is supported by what we've called an industrial decarbonisation challenge and funding to help support that. And in our view, CCUS will be crucial to the success of this mission. This was announced in December, so we are currently working with regions to understand how to support them in meeting this and the funding structures. So again, further details on that will come out this year. But I think it gives you an idea of where we see CCUS being very important to industrial decarbonisation and industrial competitiveness. Next slide. Delivery theme 4 was continuing to invest in innovation. So we see innovation as very important still to CCUS to help support cost reduction, but also position, UK as a global innovative leader in this technology, building on, as Brian mentioned, the research institutions and academia who are already leaders in this area. So we have it says here on the slide a £45 million innovation programme. Actually, that's now a £50 million innovation, over £50 million innovation programme. So we work with internationally through the Accelerating Carbon Technologies programme, and Brian will touch on that shortly. But also we have a £20 million carbon capture and utilisation demonstration programme underway, supporting industry to look at how to reuse their own emissions, capture them, and use them for industrial products. We've also got a CCUS Call for Innovation out, which is a £24 million programme supporting innovative projects which can reduce the cost of CCUS and also support accelerated deployment. Those projects will be announced, successful projects will be announced either later this month or early in April. And I think this gives a sign of our continued commitment to research and innovation on CCUS. Next. International collaboration is our final delivery theme. So I think our view is that CCUS is vital to meeting the Paris Agreement ambition. We are therefore working through our international initiatives, and Brian will touch on that shortly, addressing barriers such as the London Protocol, working individually with countries. So, for example, the UK and Norway signed a memorandum of understanding on CCUS in November, and that is designed to work together to promote cooperation and knowledge sharing on CCUS between the two countries at a government-to-government level, but also at an industry-to-industry level and academia-to-academia level. And in our view, that's very important. Brian, for example, was out in Japan last month as part of that sort of process, and I think we're always keen to engage with others. And similarly, he was in Saudi Arabia as well recently talking about CCUS. Next slide, please. And then I think a critical part of our approach has been last year was working with the International Energy Agency to hold the Accelerating CCUS Summit, which was last November. And I think that brought together 50 senior representatives from ministers, senior officials from government, CEOs from industry, and also senior executives from the financial sector. And I think the great success of the summit was that I think there was a sort of near universal recognition of the importance of CCUS, the need for urgent action, and also for the need for it to be mainstreamed within climate negotiations. And I think that's something we can all agree to. And our outcomes from the summit were set out in a joint chair summary between Claire Perry, our minister, and Fatih Birol, head of the International Energy Agency, setting out the importance of CCUS, that the new business models, supportive policies and global partnerships can deliver a rapid scale up of CCUS investment, and strengthened partnerships for accelerated deployment are crucial. And the IEA and UK government will continue to work together to maintain the momentum from the summit and also continue to push forward those outcomes from the summit. Next, please.
Thank you, Will. I'm now just going to go through a number of our commitments on international collaboration to give you an idea of the breadth and the approach that the UK is now taking. This webinar has come to you via the new CCUS SEM initiative, and the UK is a co-lead of the CCUS SEM initiative with Norway, the US, and Saudi Arabia. The key activities of the Clean Energy Ministerial, which was born last year in terms of the CCUS initiative, was to expand the spectrum of clean energy technologies under the SEM to include CCUS. We want to create a sustained platform for the private sector, governments, and the investment community to engage and accelerate CCUS deployment. We want to facilitate identification of both near and long-term investment opportunities to improve the business case for CCUS, and to disseminate emerging CCUS policy, regulatory and investment best practices as part of an integrated clean energy system. The UK is part of this new initiative to address all these issues, which, as you can see, are major parts of our action plan and our approach. In May, there will be a Clean Energy Ministerial, of which there will be a side event, and currently the co-leads are working on the side event details for that particular Clean Energy Ministerial. I also like to talk about the CCUS Mission Innovation Challenge. Mission Innovation is a global initiative of 23 countries, 19 of which are taking part in the Carbon Capture Innovation Challenge. Again, the UK is a co-lead, this time with Mexico and again with Saudi Arabia. We're currently looking towards having a roundtable at the ministerial, and we are working towards that over the next few months. The important aspect of the work that the Mission Innovation Challenge has done already was the production of a major report that 250 experts came from across the world to Houston in 2017 to produce, say, an extensive report that has developed and looked at a number of priority research directions that we are believing should be evaluated and to go forward to accelerate CCS into the future. The UK is also part of the North Sea Basin Task Force. It's a group that fosters collaboration and joint working between countries with an interest in exploiting the North Sea Basin for CCUS purposes. You saw that in a number of the slides with regard to the storage potential that the UK has. Also, Norway has as well. The North Sea Basin Task Force was established in 2005 by the UK and Norway, and it currently includes other countries such as the Netherlands, Germany, and the Flemish government. The primary aims of the group are to develop common principles for managing and regulating transport and permanent storage of carbon dioxide in the North Sea Basin subsea bed, to encourage collaborative working for finding mutually agreeable solutions to issues that arise from the transport and storage of carbon dioxide beneath the seabed over the long term. We've been working extensively across the North Sea in CCUS over a number of years. We're also interested in bilateral CCUS collaboration. And Will has alluded to the fact that we are currently speaking with a number of countries. We're speaking with Japan, Saudi Arabia. We're looking to scope out how we can collaborate on CCUS going forward. We are also, as Will said, wanting to engage with other interested countries, and we will do that with, we're doing that with Norway, we'll do that with the Netherlands, the USA, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, and all key countries that are part of the Mission Innovation and Clean Energy Ministerials that we are working together on. The UK is also part of the Carbon Sequestration Leadership Forum, currently focusing on more the technical aspects. And we like to believe that we play an active part in this important forum that brings together 23 key CCUS countries. I want to spend some time on something called ACT, which is Accelerating CCUS Technologies. Next. What is ACT? Well, ACT is a grant scheme. It's a grant scheme that has been going since 2015. It's there to accelerate CCUS technologies. In 2016, we had a call. We've had 10 partners from 9 countries. We managed to fund 8 projects during 2017. All but one are still continuing over the next 18 months, 20 months. And there was 36 million euros involved in those particular projects. Since then, we've had another call, and we are currently starting to evaluate the project proposals that have come in on the 1st of March this year. However, we've increased our partners since the first call, and I would like to believe that we will increase our partners going forward for maybe a potential call next year, still to be discussed. This was extensively a European scheme. However, we're really pleased that we've managed to encourage the USA to come onto or with us on this journey with regard to the Act, and we now have the USA involved. I would like to believe that we would have other countries, say, going forward. The budget is up to 30 million euros. We received 47 pre-proposals requesting 112 million euros of funding. We're in the evaluation phase. The pre-proposals became full proposals, and we received 26 of those. And I think as a measure of UK's interest and involvement in CCUS, out of those 26, 21 had UK involvement. 7 were UK leads, 14 were partners. So those projects will be evaluated over the next few months, and hopefully will start around about September 2019. Just to give you a flavour of some of the projects, and those who do manage to travel to a number of meetings like the GHGT that took place in Melbourne and other environments where projects are being talked about, you will hear these projects: Align, Elegancy, Preact, Acorn, Detect, all projects that have UK involvement, and each have a different facet that will actually hopefully increase the acceleration of CCUS. One of the larger projects is the Align project, and that project brings in the UK together with the Netherlands, Norway and Romania. It's about optimizing and reducing the cost of CO2 capture technologies, planning large-scale CO2 transport, providing sufficient offshore storage, developing the use of CO2 in energy storage and conversion, understanding and supporting social acceptance of CCUS, a very important aspect that the UK is starting to, not starting I should say, is continuing to focus on going forward. Next. I think I forgot to tell you to go next, so I do apologise everybody. Do a next again. And again. Sorry about that. How can one join ACT? ACT will welcome more countries to be part of the consortia. The UK is not the lead of ACT. We are a consortia led by the Research Council of Norway, and that organisation together with the UK will be very happy to speak with governments and organisations that feel that they can be part of the consortia. The important thing to be aware of is that the funding body is normally a ministry or an agency of a government. It's not a company or an industrial facility. It's the governments of those countries. They all fund the transnational calls. The important thing is to remember that national money would stay within national boundaries, something that is potentially often forgotten about. So don't worry about putting money into a pot. You don't. If you're a government listening to this, basically you would actually fund your own companies, your old universities and so on. And potentially we're looking towards Act 3 in 2020, but we still need to decide. Once we've decided, obviously we'll inform. Next.
So I think if we, I'm conscious of the time, so I think if we go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to actually end on, I think, on this slide, and that was just to say that to oversee the UK government's policy and direction on CCUS, the Minister, Claire Perry, has set up what's called a CCUS Council, and that brings together government with industry, with academia, and other senior representatives to meet three to four times a year, and allows the council to provide advice to government and to the minister on their view on progress on CCUS in the UK, their view on issues which are difficult to resolve around sort of, you know, market and business models, issues like risk allocation, and general progress against the UK government's action plan, but also just general progress on CCUS, both in the UK and internationally. And we use that to update industry on where government policy is, but also allows the minister to hear direct from industry on their views on the best way to develop CCUS in the UK. That meets, as mentioned, 3 to 4 times a year. The minutes of each meeting are made publicly available on our website, and the next meeting of the council is the 21st of March, where we will focus on discussing the action plan, and in particular some of the difficult challenges faced in creating long-term sustainable commercial models for CCUS. I think that's the right place to leave our presentation, and I think we're very keen to hear from you on any questions you might have, which Brian and I can answer.
Thank you to each of the panelists for those outstanding presentations. As we shift to the Q&A, I would like to remind our attendees to please submit questions using the question pane at any time. We do have some great questions from the audience that we'll be using the remaining time to answer and discuss. The first question is, we would be interested in your views on the commercial framework for CCUS. How do we create investable commercial frameworks?
So I think that's where we are currently working through what are the options for that. I think we're very keen in the UK to put in place not one-off models per project, but actually which work over the longer term. So I think if you look at the example of, say, offshore wind in the UK, that's been supported by a mechanism which has supported deployment, but also supported cost reductions from the industry. And I think we're very keen to work with the industry and the finance sector to understand what are the right models for CCUS. So we've got work underway at the moment, which we will make publicly available, because I think it's important to share these sort of information across countries. I think a number of countries are looking at this and working through what are the right options. And so I think it's a difficult challenge. It's dealing with issues such as risk allocation, cost reduction, private sector finance, what's the role of government, and so on. So I think we're very happy to discuss further our thoughts and also other people's thoughts on this.
Wonderful, thank you for that answer. Another question we have, with regards to the timescales laid out by the UK government, do you feel that development and deployment schedules are sufficiently rapid to achieve the government and global goals? Is it necessary to consider full-scale deployment through the 2020s to achieve these goals?
So I think it's a very good question. I think in our view, the 2030s is the critical time period, but we need to ensure that we use the 2020s to progress CCUS. So in our action plan, we set out that we are moving from an innovation phase to while continuing to support innovation, but moving to a deployment phase in the 2020s. And while we say the first CCUS facility from the mid-2020s, we obviously don't say that's the extent of our deployment. And I think a lot will depend on getting the commercial models right, ensuring, I think what we're keen to do is use the 2020s to test the commercial models for CCUS, recognizing there are different commercial models between power, between industry, and so on, and ensure that we are in a sufficiently strong place to gear up deployment in the 2030s to meet future carbon budgets and our 2050 target.
Great, thank you. One other question, two related questions, I suppose. You have a lot of ACT interaction within Europe. Is China willing to participate? How does the UK collaborate with China?
With regard to ACT itself, we are happy to collaborate with any interested country with like-minded aims and objectives under the ACT programme. We do collaborate with China, and I think Will wants to say a few words on that.
So the UK government provides funding to the Asian Development Bank CCS Trust Funds as part of our commitment under the Climate Fund. That is supporting capacity building. That Asian Development Bank CCS Trust Funds is supporting CCS capacity building in Indonesia, but also in China. And so a lot of our relationship with China is through that mechanism. We also have the UK-China CCUS Centre in southern China, and we are continuing to work through that. And I know the UK CCS Research Centre and Scottish CCS work closely with that centre. And similarly, the director in the UK government leading CCUS as a whole is due out in China in May to discuss CCUS in more detail. So I think we're very keen to work with China and on CCUS.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, a couple related ones here. Similar to other countries, the UK has had a fairly rocky CCUS path. Why is the UK still committed to progressing CCUS in the UK? How realistic is the ambition for the UK to be a world leader when other regions may be ahead in actual deployment?
I think that, thank you for that. So I think starting with the first question, I guess why I think UK similar to other countries. I think that's right, and that's well publicised. But I think importantly, the UK is still committed to progressing CCUS because I think we still see it as potentially vital to decarbonising the economy. So if we look at how you decarbonise industry, particularly those process emissions, the sort of best available technology is carbon capture. So if we want to maintain our UK's industrial competitiveness in the longer term, in carbon constrained world and so on, I think we see CCUS as vital. Similarly, we still see a role for CCUS in power. I think CCUS in power has a potentially important role in terms of providing base load, but also flexible generation as well. And that's something I think we're very keen to develop. And then I think if we look at potentially climate targets becoming more ambitious, the role of negative emissions, bioenergy, CCS, direct air capture, and so on, will all be reliant on CCUS. And then finally, if we look at the challenge of decarbonising heat in the UK, which is predominantly a natural gas system, what are the options for that? Is it electrification of heat, or is it through, for example, a hydrogen conversion? And then if we look at, in the UK, how you produce low carbon hydrogen at scale, in our view, based on available technology and so on, we think that's best delivered through the reformation of natural gas, where producing hydrogen, and the carbon from that reformation is captured and stored permanently. So I think that's why we see CCUS as important, as well as those wider industrial strategy, industrial competitiveness points that I mentioned in the presentation. In terms of where we are compared to other regions, I accept that. But I also think the UK is well positioned to provide global leadership. I think we're doing that through mission innovation, working with the US, Norway, Saudi Arabia on both mission innovation, but also clean energy ministerial. And I think we also have, I think as Brian mentioned, a well established and well respected research and development base on CCUS, which will be vital going forward. And then secondly, we have a huge storage resource, which we are keen to work with industry to unlock. And I think the UK is well positioned in the 2020s to scale up its activity.
Wonderful. In the interest of time, I think we'll have to move on. Thank you again to the panelists for that informative Q&A session. For any questions we didn't have time to get to, we will connect with those attendees offline after the webinar. Now, I'd like to provide the panelists with an opportunity to provide any additional or closing remarks you'd like to make before we end the webinar.
From my point of view, thank you for the opportunity today to present to you on the UK government's approach to CCS. I think we're happy to follow up with any questions, queries afterwards, and please do get in touch.
And just closing from Brian, I would like to say very great thank you for taking the time at various times across the world to listen to our presentation today, and for those who will be logging in at later stages to pick up the presentation. It's been a pleasure to be able to speak with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you again. I'd like to extend a thank you to all of our expert panelists and to our attendees for participating in today's webinar. We very much appreciate your time and hope in return that there were some valuable insights that you can take back to your ministries, departments, or organizations. Please enjoy the rest of your day. We hope to see you again at future CCUS events. This concludes our webinar.